Hello?
Hey, it's Lemon. Welcome to the phone call.
Oh, Lemon. I somehow knew you were going to call. It's like I can see into the future.
JK, you literally just got off my shit list.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're not. Anyway, it's time for the next contest. This time we're going to try and two-shot all the Dark Souls 2 bosses and NPCs. You in?
Okay, I'm in. I'm sure it won't be as bad as last time.
Yeah, sure it won't. Anywho, I'll be sending over the waivers shortly. Best of luck.
Wait, what was that last part? Oh, well, let's get into it. Hey, it's JK. So back in May of last year, I took part in the Backlogs one-shot contest, where me and several other deranged individuals had to attempt to one-shot every boss, NPC, and mini-boss in Dark Souls 1. With Lemon's video of the contest finally released in July of this year, a new contest was inevitable, and of course Dark Souls 2 was the next logical step. The rules are pretty similar, but with a couple of changes. We're still going to try and one-shot every boss and NPC as well as a few select mini-bosses just to bring the total number up to a clean 100 targets. Invaders thankfully are not included in this rule set because given how many of them there are in Dark Souls 2, this would take forever. Now, you might notice the inverted commas around the 1 in the title of this video. The original plan was for it to be one-shots only, as in one button press to kill a target, but after some early testing from a few people, it was determined that no one would really make it all that far if we stuck to this. Boss HP numbers are a lot higher than Dark Souls 1, and the buffs are nowhere near as broken, so a compromise was made. We would still aim for one-shots where possible, which scores you 2 points if you pull one off, but if there is no possible way to do a one-shot, then you are allowed to two-shot bosses, which will score you just 1 point. If you think this makes things a lot easier, trust me, you're wrong. This was 70 plus hours of pain. There's a number of other more specific rules, but I'll go into them as and when necessary. I'll be totally upfront here. This run for me was a bit of a car crash, honestly. As well as many mistakes made by me, there's a lot of inconsistent information online about Dark Souls 2 that led to some heartbreaking moments, including one thing I found out at the end which made me want to scream at a wall. But anyway, for now, let's dive into my entry to the contest. Now, I am required to put my quote-unquote real name for my character as per the contest rules. But even so, I couldn't make just any derp character for this, no. It has to be the Disney Prince of Derps. Which Disney film do you think this guy would be most at home in? Let me know in the comments below. The class doesn't really matter this time, but we must choose Petrified Something as our gift. The first thing we need to do is access the Diner and Tylo trades. These will be crucial for this run. I leave the Petrified Something in the nest to trade for an item and reload my save until we get the Demon's Great Hammer, our first weapon of the run and a really powerful one at that to have so early. We then arrive in Majula and light the Far Fire. Now, a couple more differences from the last contest. Cheat Engine is allowed for this run, but only to spawn in things that we can farm at the point we're at in the game. So, for example, I can spawn in souls because I could just farm them infinitely from enemies. Also, the last contest had rules about when we can and can't level up, but here we can level up as much as we please. Again, you might think this will make things easy, but if you saw Doomwolf's video last year trying to attempt the one-shot in this game, you'll know that max stats are actually the bare minimum to succeed here, so I level up to 99 strength and 99 dex, plus start putting points into int and faith. Just to mention, I'm pretty new to PC gaming as a whole and I hadn't really used Cheat Engine much before this run, so I'd like to give a big shout out to Challenger Andy, who for everybody in this contest he made a Google Doc with pictures and instructions on how to use it, which was very helpful for me especially, so big shout out to him for being just an amazing guy. Anyway, next up we head to the Forest of Fallen Giants. Here we buy 3 Bright Bugs from Melentia. These give a 20% damage boost for 2 minutes. They actually restock 5 times in the game, once after each of the 4 Great Souls are defeated, and then a final lot after defeating Looking Glass Knight, but crucially only if Melentia has 0 remaining in her stock, so it's a bright idea to buy them as soon as they become available to avoid bugging out later. We use the Pharos Lockstone she sells for an early slab, shards and the Chloranthy Ring before we kill this invisible hollow for a smooth and silky stone. Now, we go to Hyde's Tower of Flame for the first boss of the run. I of course mean Dragon Rider, who obviously is really easy to one-shot because we can get him to well, damn. Maybe I can still get him... Second try. Hopefully we rider this wave of success throughout the rest of the run. We head to No Man's Wharf now, where we kill another invisible hollow for a Petrified Something. He doesn't actually always drop a Petrified Something, so I save reloaded until he did. Because I showed earlier that this can be used to crow farm Demon's Great Hammer, I can now just spawn another hammer in to save some time. Wielding 2 of these is pretty weight load intensive as you might imagine, so I upgraded Vit to ensure I'm not overloaded. We speak to Cops to open the gate to Huntsman's Lycia, and then speak to Falcon to get his staff and buy Resonant Weapon, the best weapon buff in the game, adding a high amount of dark damage to our weapon in exchange for some of our souls. As with any of these one-shot runs, it's still set up city for a bit, so we help sober up this stoned woman, go to Shaded Woods, and buy gold pine resin from the head of Vengal, who has an infinite stock of it. We also grab the red tearstone ring nearby, an important item for this run, but one that has been heavily nerfed from Dark Souls 1, as it now only boosts damage by 20% instead of 50%, and also only applies to physical attacks. I think this may have been different in Dark Souls 2 Vanilla, but we're required to play Scholar of the First Sin for this contest, so yeah. Just a few more bits to grab. We buy the Silver Cat ring and drop down the Medulla well to get to the Grave of Saints. Using a Pharos Lockstone here lowers this bridge and lets us grab Whisper of Despair, a hex which lowers enemies' physical defenses. Shame it doesn't also lower enemies' negates. With our relevant spells attuned, we level up Inton Faith some more. So here's a quick rundown of how our weapon buffs will work for this run. Resonant Weapon, and actually any spell buffs like Great Magic Weapon, Sunlight Blade, etc. can actually be cast on either your left or right hand weapon, while Resins can only be cast on the right hand one. So we use the spell buffs on the left hand weapon and Resins on the right so we can go into fights with both of them buffed. Now we head through Huntsman's Copse for another boss. Yep, time to take on the Skeleton Lords. For any multi-enemy bosses, you have to one-shot every enemy in there for it to count as a one-shot. If even a single enemy here is killed in 2 hits, it will be marked as a 2-shot. I was really hopeful that I could do it with just my weapon buffs without the red tearstone ring, as being below 20% health would make this fight pretty annoying. With power stanced and buffed hammers, we kill the lords easily with an onslaught of L1s. All the skeletons in the fight went down easy too, thankfully, and all in one hit. I didn't have a skeleton of life gems left at the end, so it did end up being pretty close to the bone, but luckily I didn't have a skull issue and finished the fight successfully. Well, time to see what rewards we can reap in Harvest Valley. Stone Trader Cloanne sells us Soul Appease, some Titanite, and also gives us a Twinkling Titanite for spending our hard-earned cash with her. So what's the reason for wanting to come this way first? Well, I got 3 words for ya. Bane, Digger, Troll. Not sure why this guy is trying to bait fans of Batman villains, but I digress. With the cheat engine rules, I'm allowed to spawn in anything infinitely which I can demonstrate I'm able to farm at this very moment. This ruling is there to save time and hard drive space for everyone, as farming for hours on end is the bane of any runner's existence. This guy actually can drop smooth and silky stones, which is exactly what we need. I put on Covenant of Champions to stop him despawning, and after about 40 minutes of killing him, he finally drops one. Smooth, but not as silky as I'd like. These stones can be used to trade for various items at the Crow trades, such as infusion stones, but most importantly, Twinkling Titanite. We've now shown we can in theory get infinite smooth and silky stones, which in turn means infinite Twinkling Titanite, so we spawn that in and upgrade both Demon Great Hammers to +5. So after all that, what a mission that was, it's finally time to try the last giant. He has 2,530 HP, which is, pretty sizable for an early game boss. Applying the buffs is a little awkward this time round. We can apply Resonant Weapon and eat a Bright Bug before going in, but we need to cast Whisper of Despair on the giant once we're in the fight, which we need a free hand to cast. After doing this, we then switch to the right hand hammer to buff it with resin. With all buffs I currently have applied, we use the heavy power stance attack with L2, and we do about 3/4 of his health. As luck would have it though, there are more buffs that we can get. We do more crow trades until we get the Channeler's Trident, supposedly a 25% buff for our damage after we do the dance, but we also show that we can get slabs from this too, meaning we can now get unlimited Titanite slabs. I also had a brainwave for later and went to buy 2 Boruto Greatswords from the head of Vengal, and it was about that time that I realized that I had been in Covenant of Champions while I was attempting the last giant before, so I think all those stones have made my brain smooth and silky. But the failures are only going to get worse. You see, I don't know why, but I was convinced that the Trident buff lasted for 45 seconds, and I didn't realize until much later in the run that it only lasts 15 seconds. So I probably rarely got the buff from it in this early part of the run, but as you'll see later, it really wouldn't have made much difference anyway. Let's ignore my stupidity for now and go get another damage boost. We have 1 million soul memory already from all that leveling up, so we can enter the Shrine of Winter and get to Dranglake Castle early. Here we can get the Frozen Flower and head into Elium Lois. It felt pretty good to smash through the enemies here with our strong weapons. Mostly. We can get the Dark Clutch Ring here, which boosts all dark damage we do, including our Resonant Weapon buff. I also decided to buy Dark Pine Resin from Felkin, so we can go all in on dark buffs as the Last Giant is weakest to dark. So now let's try Last Giant again. Worth noting that for some reason I also became determined to try and do this without a Bright Bug, as I wanted to conserve them given their limited quantity. I did better, but still a long way away. Time to try the Boruto Greatswords instead. So back to the crow trades we go. I need to get video evidence that you can trade smooth and silky stones for titanite chunks. This actually took a lot more resetting than any of the other ones, but I also showed you can get petrified dragon bones and basically all infusion materials, so it was kinda good anyway. After, I'm not kidding, about an hour of resetting, we finally got one. As for titanite shards, they can be farmed infinitely from this hammer enemy near Earthen Peak. So now, we can spawn in shards, chunks, and slabs, but what about large titanite shards? Well, there is one respawning enemy that always drops them. The giant basilisk under Huntsman's Copse always drops 3, so now we can spawn in everything. With this, we can now upgrade both Boruto Greatswords to +10. They actually do a little more damage than the hammers thanks to the S scaling in strength, and the Last Giant takes equal damage from both slash and strike damage. So let's try once again. Better, but still quite a distance away. Will this actually end up being the last boss of this run? I next, somewhat foolishly, wondered if there was any chance I could kill the pursuer. Well, we do over half, so that's something. To be totally honest with you, I think in hindsight what I did next was a pretty poor decision. At this point, looking at our damage numbers, I for some reason decided there was probably no way to one-shot the pursuer, given we'd need to either beat him or flex our sentry to get to the Lost Bastille, home of Macduff the Infusion Blacksmith. So I decided to instead opt for a 2-shot on the pursuer in order to get the Ring of Blades, which will boost our physical damage a little. I should really have tried with the Demon Great Hammers, as they would have done 20% more damage, given that he's weak to strike, and I could have also used a Bright Bug as well, but I was blinded by my pursuit of Bright Bug free kills. Anyway, we pull off the 2-shot, even if I did embarrassingly die in the process. The worst part, with the Ring of Blades added to the setup, it was still not enough to one-shot the Last Giant. Maybe with the Trident buff, it would have been possibly, but judging by the numbers we've seen later, I'm kinda skeptical of that. So, after all of that effort, I finally just relented and used a Bright Bug, and we take out the Last Giant in one attack. I should have just done this to begin with, really. That was a giant waste of time, but hey, at least 2 more bosses are dead now. And of course, we unlock Macduff the Blacksmith, so small victories. Let's try infusing the Demon Great Hammers with lightning for the next boss, the Ruined Sentinels, who are most weak to strike and lightning apparently. They have 2,330 HP each. I've never really used infusions before, so I'll be interested to see how much this does. I mean, the damage is pretty good, it does nearly one-shot one of them. But I was kind of curious how this measured up to our normal combo of Resonant Weapon and Gold Pine Resin. So I go back to normal Demon Great Hammers, and with the Red Tearstone Ring active, we can in fact one-shot them and ruin their chances of success shortly after. No Bright Bug needed this time, and it sort of seems like infusions aren't worth it. Next, I go back to Shaded Woods to get the bonfire, and also grab another Pharos Lockstone. We need the Pharos Lockstone to unlock Belfry Luna, where we easily one-shot bonk the gargoyles with no issues. It's nice to get some Belfry points after our earlier struggles. Just beyond them is the Dragon Tooth, another powerful strike weapon that slightly edges out the Demon Great Hammer. As we're collecting weapons, I also went to Forest of Fallen Giants to open this door and grab the Grand Lance. Not sure if this will actually come in handy, but let's see, might as well get as many weapons as we can. Now, back to Hyde's Tower of Flame. It feels awesome to one-shot these annoying enemies after how long this area normally takes me on a challenge run. We use our Boruto sword setup with the Red Tearstone Ring and one-shot our friend Ian the Guard Dragon, who is in fact on the target list. By the way, the full list is in the description if you want to see it. But the question is, can we one-shot old Dragon Slayer? Even just trying to do the setup proved troublesome because of how quickly he can attack. I tried initially without a Bright Bug, but we were quite a way away. However, I did find this weird quirk where he actually seems to take more damage just as he's charging up for his jump attack. So I started baiting him, hoping that he'd do this butt slam. Now, unfortunately, this still wasn't enough to kill him without a Bright Bug, so I again had to resort to using one, wait for him to do the attack again, and land my L2 for the successful one-shot, so this didn't drag on for much longer. We get the old Leo ring for this, boosting damage to thrust counterattacks by 12.5%. Could be useful? Maybe? But for now, let's go on a long mission downwards through the gutter and into the Black Gulch. The main thing we're here for is Great Magic Weapon. It's not as good as Resonant Weapon, but for bosses that are weaker to magic, it might just help us out. We then head back to Earthen Peak to try our luck against Covetous Demon. He has 4,330 HP. For this, I use Aromatic Ooze instead of Gold Pine Resin, as apparently he's weaker to magic. We do just over half damage. I didn't die to Covetous Demon, you didn't see that. I also tried the Grand Lance here, as Jabber is weaker to thrust apparently. It did similar damage to the dual Boruto swords, even with the Leo ring on. I also tried dual Boruto swords with Great Magic Weapon instead of Resonant Weapon, but the damage was actually worse. Things are not looking promising here. I wasn't using a Bright Bug because I actually only had one left now. I'm really coveting those Dark Souls 1 damage buffs right now. Maybe I should try the Lost Sinner instead? Beating her unlocks more Bright Bugs in Melentia's shop, so it seems logical at this point. She has 3,560 HP and is weaker to magic apparently. I again tried without a Bright Bug first. The big problem is trying to hit her with the Whisper of Despair and then apply a resin during the fight. I tried just buffing the swords outside with no Whisper, but it wasn't even close to enough. The only window with enough time was when she did the jump. But even then, landing the L2 fully was kinda tough. Clearly though, the damage wasn't going to be enough without a Bright Bug. So, with a Bright Bug active and all other buffs, I managed to land the attack at last, and so close. But at this point, I became aware that you can actually use weapon buff spells on weapons that are infused for some crazy reason, so this seemed like a worthwhile avenue to investigate. I never expected them to have that kind of synergy. I go and buy loads of Boruto swords from Vengal and then infuse them with all the different elements. I also went and got the Roaring Halberd and the Gargoyle's Bident from Strayed, and I one-shot Blue Sentinel Targray to get his Blue Halberd. I also leveled Intelligence and Faith to 99 at this point because, why the hell not? I first tested 2 magic-infused greatswords on the Sinner without buffs. Yep, not even close. Then I tried the dark-infused Blue Halberd and Roaring Halberd. The damage was absolutely pitiful. But now, onto the build I thought had the highest chance of success. In my left hand, I would use a magic-infused Boruto sword which I would buff with Resonant Weapon. I'd then go in and cast Whisper of Despair, wait for the jump, and then buff my second sword with Aromatic Ooze. I just had to hope I could survive that long. I'ma be honest here, I still don't understand a lot about damage calculations in this game. I landed the attack this time with all the appropriate buffs and it did way less than I was expecting. But the next attempt, I landed it and it killed her? Is it because of the angle I hit? I'm lost, but anyway, she's dead. More Bright Bugs are ours. Further to that weirdness though, what's even more bizarre is that we couldn't kill the Flexile Sentry in one hit, even though it has less health and comparable resistances to the Lost Sinner. We did use lightning here instead because of the water, but still, super weird. So we took out Royal Rat Vanguard instead. Very easy to the surprise of no one, shame they're not vanguarding anything useful for our build though. But there is one other boss I've been putting off. Scorpioness Najka. There's a particularly valuable reward behind her. According to Wikidot, she has 5,741 HP, more HP than Calamite in Dark Souls 1 had. Let that sink in for a moment. This is where the problems of the run began. I mean, it should go without saying that a one-shot is completely out of the question, but I couldn't even take off half of her health. I did get closer with the setup of using a fire-infused Boruto sword in my left hand, but it was about 100 points of damage from being half. We need 2,871 to clear half her health. After a few tries, it was clear this was not happening right now. I needed to take another route to make progress and hopefully figure out a way to get past the crucial roadblock of Najka. So I went back to Covetous Demon. I sort of figured with his health there's no way I was going to score a one-shot, so I settled on a two-shot with no Bright Bug. Probably should have taken this sick beast to the Covette instead of just putting it down, but oh well. Further up, we meet Gilligan and buy loads of Aromatic Ooze. This route leads us to Mitha. She is most weak to thrust, but most thrust options we have aren't that great. Also, a bit weak to strike. I infused the Dragon Tooth with fire as she's weak to it. Mitha has 3,660 HP. Now maybe if I had thought more about this, I could have found a way to one-shot her, but at this point, I just wanted to make some progress as Najka was the real issue, and a lot of things that might help with her lay beyond this way. So I just bonked her twice. I promise that I'll try harder with the next bosses. In Iron Keep, we can speak to Magirold, who sells charcoal pine resin, something that will be crucial I feel for beating Najka given her weakness to fire damage. Let's see how much this makes a difference. 2,787, so it's 22 more points of damage than before. It's a shame that Flame Weapon is locked away in New Game Plus. I also tried with a power stance combo of the goggles Bident and the Grand Lance using the old Leo ring and landing a counterattack. This actually did do more, but still around 38 points of damage short of the 2-shot, and actually landing a counter hit was quite tricky anyway. Now I think it's worth mentioning, around this point, I did a lot of testing off camera with various things. If I were to go through everything I tried, we would be here all day. But let's just say, I tried basically every spell, miracle, hex, and pyromancy I could think of, and none of them came close to the damage I needed with the casting tools I could access right now. I also tried a lot of other weapons without much luck, but one positive did come of this. Sort of. I finally learned that the Trident buff actually only lasts 15 seconds. So all that time spent dancing outside the boss door was totally wasted, and many encounters could have probably been made easier. Maybe anyway. I mean, having to do that 5-second long dance during a boss fight is not ideal. Also, worth noting, everything online says that this is a 25% damage boost, but I never saw anything close to that high from any of the times I used it. But most importantly, could this make a trident in Nazca's health bar? With this knowledge in hand, I equipped my Fire Boruto Greatsword in my left hand to buff with Resonant Weapon, and a normal Boruto Sword in my right to buff with Charcoal Pine Resin. I cast Whisper of Despair on her, went behind the tree at the start of the arena, and managed to execute the Trident dance while she was still underground. I was able to buff my weapon, and just barely land the hit during the time the Trident buff was still active, and 2,935. Okay, I died, but we managed to get half her health. Now, I just need to figure out how to repeat that again. After doing this a few more times, I realized that doing this with unupgraded stamina was a pretty stupid idea and was likely causing me to die as I couldn't get out of the way after landing my hit. Also, there's one mechanic in Dark Souls 2 that I literally always forget about, which is that if you run out of stamina while attacking, your attack does less damage, so this almost certainly was hindering me. Now, all I had to do was make sure I managed to attack twice before the Trident boost wore off, unlike here where it wore off before the second hit. After many attempts, I realized I could get her stuck behind this tree, allowing me to buff freely, and I finally landed both hits during the Trident buff period. Only to be greeted by a horror beyond my imagination. She survived. It didn't kill her. What? How? Remember earlier when I said according to Wikidot when I read out her HP? I normally always use Wikidot over Fextra for information as it tends to be more accurate. But guess what? Wikidot had the wrong number for her health. In a cruel twist of fate, the number on f***ing Fextra Life of 5911 was accurate. 2956 is what I need to take half her health. 21 points short. But what could I do? There was no other damage increase I could get. This was a real sting in the tail. At this point, I had to go in a different direction. So let's try Smelter Demon. We go for our strike damage build as he's most weak to this. He has 5970 HP and under half with all of our buffs. I didn't use the Channeler's Trident buff, but getting off the Channeler's Trident dance during this fight and then buffing with Resin would not be a good time. Also, as you saw from the damage boost against Nazca, the increase is pretty minimal. I felt my hopes smelting away. Okay, but wait. We can try Old Iron King as well. Also weak to strike, he has 6070 HP, and we do 2875 damage. So close to half, but just not quite there, and there's no other way I can think to boost damage now. But I thought of another strat for Nazca. She's most weak to fire, so we grab the Black Knight Great Axe nearby, we infuse it with fire, and power stance that with a Boruto Greatsword. It's a real shame that the fire clutch ring can't be gotten now as it's locked behind Ava. But again, even with all the buffs, it's not even close to half. There was one more thing I could try though. Off the back of the build I got closest with, power stance in Grand Lance and Goggles Bident with the old Leo ring to boost counter damage, I was curious about one other attack I had access to. You see, the R2 of the Grand Lance is a move that does 4 hits, with the 4th hit doing double the damage of the previous 3. I tried this with Charcoal Pine Resin, and lo and behold, landing it in a counter window did more than enough damage, over 3,200 in fact. This was better because I only had to focus on one weapon instead of trying to buff 2, making the setup easier. But the difficulty was landing 2 counter hits during the Trident's very short time limit. I had the damage, but that window was just too short to get her to do 2 attacks I could reliably land counter hits in response to without dying. But also, sometimes this happens. Why did that do so little damage? I just don't know. Is this the end of our tale? Well, I was pretty desperate at this point, so I thought let's try something really crazy. Let's go and see if Dark Lurker is possible. Beating Dark Lurker, as you probably know, unlocks Climax, the strongest spell in the game, but Dark Diver Grandal also drops the Dragon Chime after killing him, which is the best lightning miracle chime in the game. When I did all that testing of spells, Heavenly Thunder was by far the best performing spell, but the damage simply wasn't there with the chimes we can access now. The Dragon Chime might push that damage over the edge, but I can't kill Grandal before killing Dark Lurker, as I'm pretty sure it will lock me out of getting Climax. You see, NPCs can be revived in Dark Souls 2 at a gravestone, but they don't gain additional inventory or give you extra rewards for questlines after they're dead. Anyway, we make our way through the chasm and get to Dark Lurker, prepare all our buffs and... Wait a minute, where's my buff aura? Oh my god, all your buffs get removed when entering the Dark Lurker fight? Not that it mattered because, yeah, that damage, wow. Turns out he has insane physical resistances. I'm not gonna lie guys, at this point I was really starting to lose the will. I had hit several walls and I just didn't know how to proceed. Everything was just feeling like a dead end. It seemed like the only option that might be possible was Najka with the Grand Lance strat. I was so close to getting it, but the other issue was my stamina would run out if I tried to do the Lance R2 twice in a row, meaning it only hit 3 times instead of 4. But then, it hit me. There was one extremely obvious answer I had missed this whole time. What if, after the first Lance R2, I got Najka stuck again and reapplied the Trident buff? This would undo the problem of the time limit for the Trident and also running out of stamina doing 2 hits in a row. But this did lead to another issue, the bright bug wearing off before I managed to do all this. If Najka, for example, chose to dig underground, it wasted way too much time and I'd have to end the attempt. There were also sometimes where the R2 attack would only hit 3 times instead of 4, even though I had the stamina, and I've just got no idea why. It's Dark Souls 2 doing Dark Souls 2 things. But finally, after several more hours of attempts, this happened. At long last, after I'm not joking 3 or 4 days of no progress, we finally broke down one of the walls. Naj Karma finally swings in our favour. So now, I could at last access something that should make a big difference. First though, I went to turn Pate into Pate before heading into Brightstone Cove Seldora. Blocking the way is another boss, the Congregation, but I was not in any way worried about these guys. We easily smashed them in one hit with no issues whatsoever, which was greatly satisfying. We find Creighton in a room beyond them and get the Seldora Den key from him upon giving over Pate's Ring of Thorns. I then aggro Creighton, walk back to the bonfire, and then lure him to the edge and push him off with force. He fell like a Creighton of bricks. We then use the key to get the engraved gauntlets. These gauntlets give every single one of our attacks a 5% chance to do 50% more damage. This is a real game changer for damage, but does suddenly introduce some horrible RNG. So, with this in hand, or should I say on hand, we should now be able to take out Old Iron King. We just need to get 1 crit on any of our 4 hits from the 2 Power Stance Del2s. I actually realized I didn't need to use the Trident, so this sped up the attempt significantly, and after about 30 minutes of tries, we finally get it, another unironically satisfying kill. We of course buy Melentia's new stock of Bright Bugs, and then grab the Heavy Iron Key to head into the Old Iron King DLC. We're going to do a bit of farming, so to make life easier and eliminate some annoying enemies, I grabbed some poison arrows and also buy the Jester's set to increase drop rate. The poison arrows are just mainly to eliminate all these smaller guys in this very annoying room so that we can farm the big guy for his smelter hammer. It took quite a few runs. I was doing this for around an hour or so, but finally he dropped it. One of the strongest strike weapons in the whole game. We can of course spawn in more smelter hammers now, and with them upgraded, I'm hoping this means we can now do Smelter Demon. I mean, even if we just need one crit, it won't take too long to farm, except the damage isn't enough. 2,500 from my attack means that we'd actually need 2 crits to be able to pull off the victory, which is quite unlikely to happen. This run just doesn't want me to have my nice things, does it? This is a bad hand we've been smelt, guys. Maybe it's time to look at a different approach. First, I go and grab the Priest Chime, the best chime we can get at the moment without locking anything off, which we upgrade to max and infuse with lightning. Then, I farm the blue dagger from these guys in the Iron King DLC, which boosts spell damage by 5% when held. We also grab the Sorcery Clutch Ring from here and join the Heirs of the Sun Covenant to get the Sun Seal Ring for a 5% miracle boost. So now, we have the tools to try out miracles, i.e. Heavenly Thunder, but it would be good if we could get the Lightning Clutch Ring as well, which is contained in the Sunken King DLC. I mean, we just have to get past the Rotten, which shouldn't be too... How much health does he have? So, remember our strategy for Najka? Well, I tried the same approach here given the Rotten is most weak to thrust damage. While there is just about enough time to run to the other end of the room, do the Trident Dance, dodge his attack, buff with Resin, hit him in the counter window with an R2, and then repeat the process, this actually doesn't do enough damage to kill him. But with a crit, we could do it. But the crit calculation from the Gauntlet is done on each individual part of our attack. So, from landing 2 R2s on the Lance, we do a total of 8 hits, 6 smaller ones and 2 bigger ones. To deal enough damage, we would need to have one of the 2 bigger hits at the end of the chain to be a crit or 2 of the smaller ones, both of which have pretty rotten odds of occurring. I tried this for literally days. Days of attempts with no crit in sight. At one point I switched and tried Heavenly Thunder, but that was nowhere close, although I did learn that spells can also score crits, which was a neat bit of info. I tried some sorcery, my greatsword build with different buffs, but none of these seemed like the answer. I looked again into multi-hit attacks within the game and found that apparently the power stance of the Warp Sword you get from the Flexile Sentry's soul has a multi-hit attack. I quickly went to 2-shot the Sentry. In hindsight, I probably could have figured out a way to one-shot him, but at this point I was laser focused on the Rotten. I tried power stancing the Warp Sword with many different weapons like the Black Steel Katana, the Ice Rapier, but was left with nothing but disappointment. I did a bunch of testing of other weapons as well, like the Power Stance Majestic Greatsword, which I just didn't record at this point because this run was already taking up hundreds of gigabytes of space on my PC. I decided there was only one thing for it. It was the Grand Lance strat or nothing. Finally, 3 days after I started attempting the Rotten, it finally happened. My first R2 got a crit on the final hit. I barely escaped his AoE follow-up. My heart was racing at this point because if I choked here, it could be days before I got this chance again. Thankfully, I applied all the buffs as needed, dodged his attacks, and finally landed the second R2 in his counter window to finish this one off. My brain honestly felt like it had rotten away from the 3-figure amount of attempts this took to pull off. Contests are fun, right? Right? But no rest for us. We grab the Dragon Talon, head into the Sunken Crown DLC, grab the Eternal Sanctum Key, and unlock the bonfire with a throwing knife. We had to get them in there somewhere, right? We finally get the Lightning Clutch Ring. Now, let's clear up some other bosses in the base game, starting with Executioner's Chariot. I honestly thought this would be easy. I mean, a one-shot probably won't be on the table with his 4140 HP, but this should be a pretty simple 2-shot. Wait, did he just take damage coming through the gate? Does that count as a hit? So the options are either to one-shot him after he crashes through the gate, meaning we have to deal nearly 4000 damage, or 2-shot him while he's riding around. Hitting him while he goes round is viable, and even without the red Tearstone ring, my double Boruto sword setup with lightning and magic dealt enough damage to do this with just 1 crit, so I was okay to farm it, even though having to kill the skeletons and mages each time was pretty annoying. So after a number of attempts we get the crit, and then land our second blow. If only things were that simple. The Executioner's Chariot boss won't die while running around, it has to be knocked off this ledge, which requires another hit. However, I did speak with Lemon about this, and he confirmed that as long as the damage was definitely enough to deplete its health, he won't count this hit to knock it down the hole. We can see from the previous clip that my normal attack did 1,871 and the crit did 2,320, making 4,191, 51 points more than its 4,140 health. So we pop it down with a throwing knife to execute this annoying horse and move on. Next, we handle the Royal Rat Authority, which was one of my favourite kills of the whole run. First, we use scraps of life to kill the smaller rats quickly. Then, we use the Hex Dead again to turn their corpses into grenades, blowing up and doing huge damage to the big guy, eradicating him in just 2 casts. Shame we can't get some of his warm beverage to celebrate. You know, Royal Rat Authority? Well, let's finish off the last of the 4 great souls, Freya. She's weak to strike damage and has much less health than some of the other bosses we finished off, so I'm not afraid. The double smelter hammer will get the job done. Yeah, there we go, easily over half. Wait, what? Why did that do so much less? Oh, her head came off. On the next try, I got a super unnecessary crit and then finished her off by hitting her head on the other side this time. She thought she was 1 step ahead of me, but we've been through too much to juke now. We quickly bonk Duke Seldora, which is also a target by the way, before Aldia says hi and we return to Dranglake Castle. So next up is Twin Dragon Riders who, like most armoured enemies, are weaker to strike. We 2-shot the one with more health and 1-shot the one with less health. I actually realised watching this back we forgot to put Gold Pine Resin on, but I don't think it would have been enough to override the first one's massive health. We do the usual Dranglake Castle stuff and move on to the real trial of this area, Looking Glass Knight. He's, again, weak to strike, I'm noticing a theme here, so we'll try double smelter hammers again, although the size of his health bar is pretty scary at 6,540 HP. How will he fare against our glass cannon build? With all buffs minus the trident, we do 2,776. It would take 2 crits amongst our 4 hits from the 2 L2s to get the job done with that damage. So, how can we get more damage now? Well, there was still the Ring of Blades +1, but that again means we'd need to beat Smelter Demon. To be fair, that seems more likely than LGK at the moment. Double Smelter Hammers is out, but what about the single Smelter Hammer with the spinning L2 attack? This attack hits multiple times and ends with a final attack that does a lot more damage than the previous few. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite do half. It would need a crit on the final hit, similar to what we had to do with the Rotten. Our chances might improve with the Trident Dance, but I just don't see a window for it in this fight given how quick he closes the distance. In another heartbreaking moment for this run, after a lot of attempts, I was able to get the crit, but died before I could land the second part. I actually wanted to throw myself into a smelter oven after this. This strategy is far from perfect. There's so many things that can go wrong with this, like Smelter starting his phase transition during our spin, doubling his defenses, or sometimes he jumps out of the way of our hits. So many attempts ended without even the chance to get the crit we needed. This was yet another horrible RNG sesh. We might be cooked here. But then, I came up with my craziest idea yet. Poison. No, really. If I can proc poison in my one attack, then poison is totally legal, and because the Smelter Hammer L2 hits multiple times, it might just be possible. So, we buff with Rotten Pine Resin, enter, and cast Whisper of Despair. I then stay close to Smelty until I can land the spin, and the poison does indeed proc. When he phase transitions, we reapply Whisper of Despair and our Rotten Resin. I land the second spin when the poison ends, and luckily it also staggers him so we have time to get away. After that, we let the poison do its job, we just need to survive. Thankfully, we do, and Smelter Demon goes down shortly after, demonstrating that where there's a will, there's a way. Although there's barely a will at this point, not gonna lie. The additional pursuers, thankfully, are not counted as targets, so we're allowed to kill them normally, granting us the Ring of Blades +1. I did try the poison strat with LGK as well, but his shield prevents all the swings of the L2 from hitting. I tried also with the Grand Lance, but no dice. Ring of Blades +1 barely made any difference. Even as stumped as I was with some of the other bosses, Looking Glass Knight really has me looking at whether I can continue. As with the last time I felt true desperation, part of me felt like I wanted to try Dark Lurker again. Climax just might be the only thing that could save me. LGK's health was just too high for melee it seems. Hey, we didn't have Smelter Hammers last time. Maybe they'll do more damage to Dark Lurker. Nope, that's pretty bad. So it seems like melee just doesn't really work for this guy. He has a lot of defense allurcated on the physical side. But what about Heavenly Thunder? He is weak to lightning after all. This seems like a good time to talk a little bit about Heavenly Thunder. It's very random. Lightning bolts strike the ground in the surrounding area, often spread wide apart, and from testing it seems that the max that can land on a target per cast is 4 bolts. But that's against a big target like the Rotten. Dark Lurker is quite svelte comparatively. Getting even 1 bolt to hit him can be challenging, and to deplete his 5770 HP, we'd need 8 total bolts to hit him with our current damage of 761 per bolt. In all the time I attempted Dark Lurker on this run, I never saw 4 bolts hit him when he's solo. But the good news is there is another way to improve our damage. By farming this enemy in Belfry Soul, we can get the Black Witch Domino Mask to boost our spell damage by a whopping 3%. Great. Hopefully it was worth the 90 minutes this took to farm. So with this equipped, the Lightning Clutch Ring and the Bright Bug that we ate in the arena, we can do 784 per bolt. However, if we can do the Trident Dance in there, which actually is not that difficult to do if you bait his aerial laser attack, the bolts now do 823 damage. The painful thing there is 7 bolts landing would do 5761, 9 points of damage away from depleting his health. So, was getting these upgrades pointless? Well, yes, but no. So we can technically defeat him with 7 bolts, but one of them has to be a crit. We could have 3 bolts land with the first cast, and then 4 bolts land with the second cast, something that would in theory be easier because we could cast it as he splits in 2, giving us a wider target to hit. We'd also only need to do the Trident Dance for the first cast, as the non-Trident buff damage would be sufficient as long as the 4 bolts land, and any one of our 7 bolts was a crit. But let me tell you, landing 3 bolts on him for the first cast is a very rare occurrence. In the over 250 attempts I had trying to do Dark Lurker here, there was only about 10 times where I managed to land the 3 bolts on him. Of those 10 attempts, only one of them saw me successfully land 4 bolts on him as he split after this, but of course, there was no crit. But the thing that made it feel all the more hopeless, across all those attempts, I only ever saw 1 bolt get the crit buff. I don't know if Heavenly Thunder has a lower chance of crits than melee, but it certainly seems that way. I'm not sure if there would be any way to compare properly, but the RNG for this felt on par with Manus in Dark Souls 1, and maybe even worse, who knows. The only other way to boost my damage right now would be with the Dragon Chime, but that again means killing Grandau and missing out on Climax. In any case, after an absolutely disgusting amount of attempts, it really felt like this wasn't going to happen. I guess the difference between this and Manus is that I'd actually seen the Manus kill happen before I did it, but here, this was something unseen, something truly dark. So, I gave up and I went back to Looking Glass Knight. Heavenly Thunder did awful damage as expected, given he resists lightning. The double smelter hammer still felt like the best damage I could get. But I did think of one way to try to boost the damage further. I respec to reduce my vitality so Flynn's ring, which we grabbed from the Sunken King DLC, would actually do something. This ring boosts physical damage depending on how low your vitality stat is. With a Bright Bug, Ring of Blades +1, Flynn's ring, Resonant Weapon, Dark Pine Resin, and Dark Clutch Ring, we could get about 2,850 per attack, but it still wasn't enough to finish him off without 2 crits. Maybe this was impossible and I just had to accept it and end the run here. I mean, I've done well enough to get this far, right? But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, frustration overtaking my whole body. Was there really no way through the Looking Glass? But then suddenly, it hit me. I had just one last wild idea. Would it be possible to Trident Dance during the fight? I hadn't even attempted this with many other bosses, but perhaps, just perhaps. I remembered the pillars on the left in his boss room. To my surprise, it actually was possible to run behind the pillars to the left and get the dance off without getting killed by him. But getting myself into position to actually attack him with my fat rolling was not the easiest. But what happened next was really unexpected. I ate the Bright Bug, went in and cast Whisper of Despair and ran to the pillars. I pulled off the dance, got my resin on, and ran round him as he did the jump, landing my attack. This did 3,002 damage, so it finally put him into a range where another attack with a crit would get the job done. And crazily, I didn't need to farm for this because I recklessly went in for another attack, and lo and behold, it was a crit. This was literally the first time I successfully got a Trident buffed hit on him, so to get the crit here was kinda wild. He has finally been two-shot, at last eliminating another roadblock. Before this happened, I really thought this was where the run was about to end, but somehow we're still going. After buying the final lot of Bright Bugs, we now get to enter this joyous place. You know what? To be fair, smashing the enemies in here with our massive swords was super satisfying. We take this hidden path through the water to get Sunlight Blade, a lightning weapon buff. Not as powerful as Resonant Weapon, but good for anything weak to lightning. With little respite, we're now onto Demon of Song. Normally not an issue in a normal run, but it has 6180 HP, which is still a pretty high number. I tried Heavenly Thunder first as it's in water, and while the damage is good, it's unlikely it would clear half its health as our damage stands now. So Double Dark Bonk was next. Again, not quite enough without 2 crits. Now if we do the L2 while two-handing a Smelter Hammer, we actually do get a lot closer. We would be able to pull it off, but only if the crit was on the final hit of the spin. Basically the same strat we were trying on Smelter Demon earlier, but equally inconsistent because landing the spinning attack is pretty awkward given the possibility of bouncing off its hood. But, there might just be another option. There was a weapon that I had used in some of my offline testing against the Rotten, which I wanted to try again. So we head to Gurm's Respite to farm this Mastodon Knight until he drops the Mastodon Halberd. Now don't be fooled by the numbers you see in this weapon's stat screen. The two-handed R2 of this halberd does a double hitting swing which does huge damage for each hit, providing you're the right distance from the target. The sweet spot mechanic in this game means certain weapon types, such as halberds or reapers, do less damage if you're too close to the target. So, with all the relevant buffs including the trident, each swing does 1526, meaning it's 3052 per attack. Sadly, this isn't enough to get the job done without a crit. But the good news is the trident only adds a little bit of damage, meaning without it we do 2900 per R2, which is still within the range of 1 crit getting the job done. It's always good to be able to remove the trident because it really slows down the attempts when you have to find a window to dance around like an idiot. So after about 40 minutes of attempts, we get the crit and leave this frog singing a different tune as it croaks. We proceed onwards, Audia bothers us yet again, reminding us we will probably never be able to fight him. But after breezing through the crypt, it's now time for one of what I feel will be the biggest roadblocks of the run and maybe where we end up finishing. Velstad, who has 6290 HP. He's weak to lightning and strike damage. Now you might be thinking that's less HP than LGK, so surely this can't be too bad. Well, just wait. Let's try double Smelter Hammer Bonk first. I actually thought I was going to do it first try here after getting a crit on literally the first attack I did. But then you realize why this is going to be an issue. Velstad's defenses double in his second phase, beginning as soon as he starts the phase transition animation. It is possible to hit Velstad twice before his phase transition, but only if he's in the middle of one of his attack combos when you land the first hit. But even so, we would need 2 crits for the damage to add up, and doing the trident dance during the fight is definitely not possible. So that's out. But what about Heavenly Thunder? Well, with the trident buff, which we can afford to do outside the boss fog with this strat, we do 823 per bolt. We could potentially kill him, but I'd need 4 bolts to land from each cast. Even 7 bolts and a crit wouldn't quite do it. Getting 4 bolts to land from each cast is one thing, but getting all those bolts to land before he enters the phase transition seems pretty unlikely. Landing multiple bolts on him was more frequent than Dark Lurker, but still inconsistent. It was another horrible RNG sesh, which this run just seems to be full of for me. I tried of course with my Mastodon Halberd and Spinning Smelter Hammer, but neither would get the job done without multiple crits. Would this be the wall that we leave Vel standing? So, it was at this point I made at least what I believed at the time to be a somewhat risky play. Given the remaining bosses, how much health they had, and their resistance to dark damage, I came to the conclusion that Climax actually wouldn't be that useful anymore. This being the case, killing Grandal was fair game to get the Dragon Chime at last. So, first I went back to Grandal and encountered Dark Lurker again before Homeward Boning out to make absolutely sure I could access Dark Lurker again after Grandal's death. Right, so let's bonk this guy in a wheelchair. I use all my buffs except Red Tearstone, but he's just an old man, so he should... How much health does this guy have? Okay, well I get the Red Tearstone ring active, and this time we Dark Drive this guy into the ground. We get the Dragon Chime upgraded and infused with lightning at Macduff. So, how much difference has this made? Well, with the Trident buff, we do 961 damage, which means that, unfortunately, we still need 7 bolts to land to get the kill. Without the Trident, we do 915, which still means 7 bolts, so we might as well just do that to save a bit of time. The Dragon Chime reduces the RNG by a little bit at least, but whether it was worth sacrificing Climax remains to be seen. This still took a lot of attempts, the most crushing being when every bolt hit, but he started the phase transition right before the final bolt connected, meaning the damage just wasn't quite enough. But finally, this happened. So crazy thing to note, the same thing happened again. He went into the phase transition before the final hit landed, but the penultimate bolt was actually a crit, meaning the damage was still enough. Somehow, some way, this run is just still going. Before heading to Audia's Keep, I went to see Bastille in the Lost Lucatiel as she moves to Audia's Keep after you enter there. I didn't want this to happen because, well, there's nowhere to fall off in Audia's Keep. I aggro her, reset her health by resting at the bonfire, and then force her to see my point of view. We enter Audia's Keep where we easily one-shot this mimic by the bonfire. Before going in further, I want to do Navlan's quest, so we go on one-shot KO the cartographer as well as laddersmith Gilligan. We head back to Audia's Keep, unlock the secret bonfire, and prepare for a fan favourite of the channel, Ian the Guard Dragon. Ian was really easy compared to the other bosses. Mastodon Halberd with Resident Weapon was easily enough to take him out with 2 R2 spins. A smooth fight, but we can't let our guard down. We get the feather from the Emerald Herald, make ourselves hollow so Navlan will talk to us, then do all his quest dialogue to get the spell Unleash Magic. It boosts magic damage by 20%, but sadly doesn't stack with Bright Bugs, so it's not that useful, but at least saves on using Bright Bugs if we want to unleash any more magic kills. We head to the Dragon Shrine, kill the Drakekeeper Knights, take out Gaia the Dragon Champion, and get the Ashen Mist Heart from the Ancient Dragon. Should we try him? 19,000 HP? Yeah, no, I'm good. I also didn't try Vendrick for a similar reason, as we wouldn't be able to get the 5th Giant Soul, so he'd have double defenses and 11,450 HP. So, yeah. If anyone in the contest figures out a way to kill either of these two, then they deserve to win, honestly. I head into the Memory of Jade to take on Giant Lord instead. He has 5,970 HP. With 2 Mastodon Halberd R2s, we do 5,512 damage, so we're still a little bit short. But I realised there was a new buff that I forgot about. We trade Velstad's Soul for Sacred Oath, which adds 50 extra physical damage to our attacks for 40 seconds. This does stack with Bright Bugs as long as we cast it first in the chain. This now brings our damage up to 2,982 for each R2, meaning that 2 of them does 5,964 damage. 6 whole points of damage short of the 2-shot. Okay, but wait, we have not yet been using the Trident. We have time to cast all our buffs here, so as long as I run to Giant Lord, don't get hit by the fireballs, cast Whisper of Despair on him, and then land the attacks in 15 seconds after dancing, we can do this. I mean, not if I mess up the sweet spot like here though. But at least we got the damage. On the next attempt, we lured him in and land both attacks flush, taking down another giant wall in our path. Well, I guess this means we can enter the Throne of Want. No idea how this is going to go, but I'll try with my trusty Mastodon Halberd. Throne Defender has 3,910 HP, and Throne Watcher has 2,760 HP, which is a lot less than most of the bosses we've encountered recently. The downside? There's 2 of them. However, damage-wise, there is no issue for a 2-shot. To be fair, I could have probably one-shot the Watcher easily, but I wouldn't have been able to one-shot the Defender, so I wouldn't have gotten extra points for this. This was another pretty easy fight as both of them get thrown off this mortal coil pretty swiftly on my second try. But this is where the good times end. Nashandra, she has 8,770 HP. I tried all my melee builds, but even with 4 crits, this just wouldn't work. The only thing that came somewhat close, if you can even call it that, was Heavenly Thunder, but even then, I would need 4 bolts to hit with each cast, and 4 of the bolts to be crits, which, yeah, you know what? I'm not doing that. There's probably a way to do it that might be easier, and I've no doubt that somebody will figure it out. But after nearly 80 hours of this run, I'm ready to start putting it to bed. But that doesn't mean we're done here. Not just yet. There are still a lot of NPCs and mini-bosses to kill. So, let's go work through some of that anger this run has instilled in me. Well, that was good. Worth noting that I didn't kill Majorold yet because I wanted to get the Dragon Torso Stone. I farmed a Dragon Scale from these Dragon Knights, which means of course now I can spawn them in. So I grabbed the Petrified Dragon Egg to open up the Dragon Covenant with Majorold and give him enough Dragon Scales to get the Dragon Torso Stone, a roar which buffs all our damage for 6 seconds. The only drawback with this is that it puts armor on you, meaning you can't actually use the Engraved Gauntlets or the Black Witch Domino Mask in combination with it, so I doubt whether it would be worth using it over those. I knew this would probably be a lost cause, but I tried some of the DLC bosses and yeah, this isn't even close to happening. Their health and damage resistances are way higher than anything in the base game. Maybe there are ways to do them, and if anyone figures them out, major kudos, but I think I'm good. I think I'm good. As much as I would like this to be over now, there are still a couple more loose ends to tie up, and remember at the start of the video when I said something happened that made me want to scream? Well, it's that time! The series of events that transpired next left me shell-shocked. I decided I might as well try Dark Lurker now we have the Dragon Torso Stone. You recall how much struggle I had getting 3 bolts to hit Dark Lurker before? Well, watch what happened on my first time attempting him now. Three bolts hit him twice in a row. He didn't even split. I couldn't believe it. Dark Lurker is actually defeated. I decided to go and speak to Grandal anyway just for the hell of it, and to my abject horror, he gave me Climax. This means that I could have killed Grandal for the Dragon Chime right from the start of this run and locked myself out of nothing. This run could have been so much easier. Dragon Chime with Heavenly Thunder would have probably smashed through Nazca, the Rotten, and many of those other early bosses that took me hours and days of attempts. That really hurts. Dark Souls 2 twists the knife one final time. Okay, well, what about Climax itself, though? Well, it was pretty underwhelming, to be honest, at least at this point in the run. Nowhere near enough damage for Nashandra. But hey, at least we can use it to take out the Gank Squad. That's one boss left we can do. Oh, we can't even one-shot Sarah with it. Wow, what an anti-climax. Okay, well in that case, let's just go back to Bonk. I could possibly have one-shot them, but I was so done with this run, especially after that revelation. I didn't even use Red Tearstone Ring and just bonked them easily in 2 hits each. So, that concludes our entry for the Backlogs Dark Souls 2 contest. Who will win and who will lose? Well, be on the lookout for more entries in the contest coming out over the following months, and Lemon's video which will no doubt be released in a timely fashion. I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, I've been JK Leeds. See ya, and have a good one.